Welcome to another episode of Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen. Of course, I'm your host, JJ Kitchen. We got a fun video today for all the subscribers. Ranking the ACC? I don't think so. I think we're going to put them into tiers. Which teams are prepared for a conference contender? Which teams are good? Which teams are bad? And, well, which ones are like Florida State? That's kind of where we are at this point. We're going to go into the different tiers of where we are through 6 weeks of the college football season. It's been a really exciting time for the ACC. Truly, the conference, as I said before the season even started, this is a deeper conference than what people thought. And it's, through 6 weeks, this has really been a fun thing to watch. There are some teams at the top you never thought about. There are teams at the bottom that people didn't think that were going to be there. We'll go into a bunch of that today. We'll bring up the simulator to really put each team into a different category for the ones that I have planned out. But before we get into it, guys, as always, if you have not done so, we continue to do ACC work, plus, obviously, my home team, Pitt. If you haven't done so, subscribe to the channel. Obviously, we interviewed David McKenzie about the ACC, obviously, and where conference realignment's headed. Subscribe to the channel to see all of our next interviews and our more ACC content. Also, to like the video. It helps out with the algorithm. Also, in the comments section, let me know your thoughts. Where would you put each team? I love to see every one of the fans, but more importantly, your comments, because it means that much to me as the channel continues to grow. Before we get started, obviously, the show is sponsored by Colonial Beer, located at 4986 Library Road in Bethel Park, PA, 15102. Truly, two great individuals, great pit men, people who really do a great job overall in a small business aspect. But two, if you're heading down to a tailgate, if you're heading out to see family members or going to a party, head over to Colonial Beer. The selection is huge, obviously, but two, they have great customer service. Head on over to Colonial Beer, located at 4986 Library Road in Bethel Park, PA, 15102. And the show is also sponsored by Thompson Law Group. Right now, with many people struggling with the economy and rising costs, they're helping many people and businesses with their debts, and they're offering a free telephone consultations to assess all the options available to those who are struggling, no matter the type of debt you're currently in. You can reach out to 724-799-8404 and also check them out at thompsonattorney.com. Personally, me, with my questions, I head over to Brian Thompson, a guy that I've known for a long time, tremendous attorney. One, not just because he has his own firm, but more importantly, he takes care of the client. A lot of other large institutions for attorneys really treat people as if they're a number. Brian's different. As someone that I've gotten to know over the last 15 to 20 years, a guy that really I appreciate for what he's done overall in my lifetime to answer my questions and to help me out. He does a tremendous job, great family man, but more importantly, what he does for the community. So if you haven't done so and you need help, reach out to Thompson Law Group with Brian Thompson. Call them at 724-799-8404 and at thompsonattorney.com. Guys, again, we get into the topic of the day, and that's really the tiers of the ACC. And really, I'm going to share my screen with you guys, and we're going to go over a bunch of these teams. And again, like I've said before, the ACC is a good football conference, and I think overall this year you're really seeing that with a number of different teams. Obviously, let's see here. Pull it up here. Perfect. So really, we have a number of different categories here and how I put them into it. Obviously, a playoff team. We'll go into why I'm not going to put a team in there yet. Obviously, we're being 5 weeks in. Conference champion contenders, good, mid, and bad. Those are really the tiers that I have into here. And each one of these teams fit into a different mold than what we're going to talk about today. But overall, you look at the ACC, what's been able to do. Multiple teams that we're going to go over today winning outside the conference, whether it was the SEC, the Big 10, or the Big 12, really good non-conference slates. That's really something that the ACC has taken pride in. Obviously, as being a Pitt fan, we've seen bowl games with Michigan State, but then obviously 2 away games with Cincinnati, West Virginia, Tennessee, just to name a few, Notre Dame. So it's a really good in terms of conference. But when you look at the actual non-conference schedule, the ACC's done a good job of always looking to really schedule out the harder games. Clemson with Georgia, it's just, and again, Miami with Florida. Overall, it's been really competitive. But let's dive into it here. The first team that we're going to take a look at here is Boston College. And I'm putting them right now in that good contention. And the reason why is when I look over this schedule, for Boston College. Okay, they're 1-1. They're a good football team. They've suffered a loss so far in terms of their conference schedule, but this is a football team that only lost by 7 points to Mizzou. Obviously, they were a top 10 team. They recently lost to Texas A&M. Potentially, you look at Missouri as a potential fraud when it comes to the college, the AP top 25. But at the end of the day, they're still ranked, and they did a really good job in the beginning of the season. Obviously, Boston College beat Florida State while they were ranked. They also did take down Michigan State of the Big Ten and a big out-of-conference win for respect for the ACC. Obviously, Michigan State's not having a great year, but still it's a non-con win that you wanted to get on the schedule. I think Bill O'Brien's really done a great job, what he's done up there with overall the coaching staff. I think he's done a great job in terms of putting together a good staff, but really coaching these guys up and getting them to play at a high level. Castellanos, I think, is playing a really good brand of football right now. Their offensive line, I like what they do up front. They're a physical football team. And I think right now, even though it's only one loss, they can certainly each week this will change. I think that they can certainly move up into conference champion contenders with only one loss. I think it's kind of where we are at this point. But overall, Boston College is a team that you look from week to week. This is a team that can really compete for a conference championship right now, no matter what. They're a really good football team, and that's kind of where I had them at this point. When it comes to the playoff teams right here, since we're only through 6 weeks, I think by week 8 or week 9, I'll be able to put 2 teams really in there as we start to get closer because one, it's just too evened out at this point, so no one will be in the playoff contention. But for future reference, for weeks go on, we'll be putting a couple teams in there as the weeks go on. For Clemson, conference champion contender at this point, guys. I think when you look at overall, it's about time that really Dabo Swinney allowed, Cade Klubnik to really grow, Garrett Riley to run his offense. Clemson's defense has played at a high level. Obviously, right now, 3-0 in conference, 4-1 overall, with their only one loss being to, you look at them, Georgia, who was number 1 in the country, and I still think a top 5 team, top 3 team in the country at this point. Clemson's has really done a good job of growth from that first game. And I think that when you look at Dabo Swinney, how he continues to adapt, obviously a guy that hasn't really taken on to the transfer portal. People have talked about that for numerous different times. But at the end of the day, you look at overall in the ACC, he's the winningest coach in the ACC. He's done a great job, multiple national championships, multiple runs in the college football playoff. Just uber success in what Clemson has really turned out to be. And this year is just nothing different. When you're currently sitting at 4-1, you're doing a really good job up to this point. Their defense playing at a high level. Cade Klubnik continues to play at a high level. Garrett Riley continues to get this offense clicking. Even with a lackluster wide receiver room that I think could be a little bit better if they use the portal, but the running game is fantastic. I think overall Clemson eventually will move up into that playoff bracket, a team that continues to grow and get better. Now we come up to Cal. When it comes to Cal, I'm going to be putting them in the mid category, and here's why. When you look at Cal, obviously currently sitting at 0-2 in the conference, but 3-2 overall. I think that I thought about putting them in the bad section because one, obviously the previous game against Miami, they were up 35-10 at one point. Really blowing a 25-point lead, which is just unrecognizable. I think the only reason why I put them into mid is because they still are 3-2, even though they are 0-2 in conference, but they're scoring points. Their defense might not look really good, but the running back of California, I thought he looks fantastic. I think the offensive line for them can be really aggressive and really good. They can certainly surprise some football teams going forward here and there. But right now, just that loss overall, I really got them in that mid tier where it's mid and almost sliding down to bad. If they lose this weekend against Pitt, I'm certainly going to put them into the bad categories. That puts them at a 3-3. I think Will Cox is a good football coach. He's in his ninth season at California. I think he's done a good job for what's really been out there. Obviously, the atmosphere last week was great. Obviously, we'll see what they look like this weekend as they come to Pittsburgh. I'll be at that game, so I'll be able to get more of a description of what their team looks like up close and personal. But from what I'm seeing, I'm putting them as a mid team right now because they've had out of conference wins. They beat Auburn early on in the year. Overall, I think when you look at this football team, they have a chance to stay in that mid category. I expected them this year to really start out in the bad. I didn't think they'd be as good as they are at this point. They're certainly a formidable football team up to this point, but if they lose this weekend, they're going to drop down to the bad category next week when we do a podcast on this. But right now, I've got them in the mid category. When it comes to Syracuse, I've got them in the good category, and here's why. I think overall, when you look at really what they've done, and honestly, I'm going to put them, since here we are for where we are at this point, I'm putting them up in a conference champion contender. And here's why. One, Fran Brown, obviously the new head football coach. He's in his first year ever as a head football coach, comes over from Georgia, gets Kyle McCord out of the transfer portal. I'm putting them up there. Obviously, they only have one loss. They have one loss in terms of the conference foes. They're 1-1. But overall, I think that when you look at them from a standard of, they barely got by UNLV, which is, can be scary at times. Obviously, UNLV obviously took out two Big 12 teams earlier on in the year. I think overall, when you look at Syracuse, 1-1 in the conference, 4-1 overall, 3-1 at home, 1-0 on the road. I think they've done a really good job up to this point. Obviously, they suffered one loss. That kind of hurt them a little bit. But overall, I think that, it's a conference loss. So it wasn't a non-Power 4 loss. It's up there. I think that what really keeps them in it to this point is their offense. Their defense at times has shown that they can be really, really good and play a high-level brand of football. Obviously, Robinson, the defensive coordinator, has got a wealth of knowledge. Obviously, coached at Penn State, coached at Texas A&M, was a defensive coordinator at Texas A&M as well. He's got a wealth of knowledge. I think they're going to recruit at a high level. Kyle McCord obviously being there this year, he'll be there next year as well. But I think so far this year, what Syracuse has done is really gone out to a really good aspect of it. It's only got one conference loss to this point, but I want to see what Syracuse does on a week-to-week basis, as every year under Dino Babers, they had a 5-0 start or a 6-0 start, and all of a sudden they just dropped off the face of the earth, going 1-5. Or 0-6, dropping to 6-6 on the year, 7-5, one of those two. I want to see as potentially a growth pattern of what we've seen. Obviously they have a quarterback this year. They got a really good offense in terms of moving the football. Can really move the football at will when you look at what they do. But overall, I got them in the conference champion contender because, one, their offense is at a different level right now. Their defense is a little bit higher than what Cal's is and what Boston College is at this point. Obviously, I think there's a good feeling about Syracuse, but I think overall, when you look at Fran Brown as a first-year head football coach, we'll see what they look like going forward, but they're certainly a conference contender with only one loss. But they have that great offense like a Cal does, like a Boston College does, in my opinion. But the question is, at this point, what does the defense look like? And I think their defense is pretty above average at this point, which keeps them in the conference champion contender at this point. Then you look at Duke. Duke is a football team, obviously coming off one. They had a really good overall comeback against North Carolina. That was really good. But then they lost to Georgia Tech. That's kind of like the aspect of, man, I looked at that. I really had them in that area of a conference contender. I really wanted him to stay in that category because when I like Duke football, Manny Diaz, obviously another first-year head football coach. I'm putting him in the good category, even though with only one conference loss, currently sitting at 5-1. Let me make sure I have that correct here in my notes. Yeah, 5-1 overall, 1-1 in the conference. The reason why I had them in the good category, just the Georgia Tech loss, I got them as a really good defense overall. They play a great brand of defense. Obviously, a Manny Diaz staple for what he's done to this point. But the question I have at this point is the offense. The offense can be really inconsistent. Malik Murphy, the quarterback at Duke, obviously transferred from University of Texas. I think he's done good, but then you looked at the North Carolina game. He struggled there, was under 50% completion percentage, just over 200 yards passing. He struggled this past weekend, and what he's able to do against Georgia Tech, struggled there. I still think they have an elite level style defense in the ACC. I think they're going to be a tough out for any team they play. If they can get a sustainable and more convincing offense week in and week out, I think they can go from good to conference champion. Obviously, they suffer another loss, and then their offense continues to struggle. They may drop down to mid as the weeks go on. Florida State, this is a pretty easy one, bad. For how much Florida State talked over the entire course of the year. They sued, obviously, the ACC, looking to get out of the ACC. They're in a battle there. They're losing pretty handily right now. They went back to the ACC to talk about a settlement to get more money to stay in the ACC, to 2030 and beyond. That hasn't been going well. But overall, I think that Mike Norvell, I think overall can be a good football coach. But like Nick Saban said on College Game Day, when you go to pay football players, you have a $22 million budget. If you pay the wrong people with the $22 million, you're shit out of luck. And I think that right now, you look at Florida State, I think their defense can play really well at times. Obviously, I think their defense has done a good job, but the offense is absolutely horrendous. I think DJ was just a really bad pick at quarterback. I was shocked that's what they went with. I think people had a lot of questions, obviously. At Clemson, he struggled there. Then he goes to Oregon State, plays out in the Pac-12. I think the Pac-12 wasn't as physical as the ACC, clearly. Comes to the ACC, and just things are all back to what it was against Clemson and when he was there at Clemson, and really just struggled all year. All year so far. And then obviously had a finger injury. He's out the rest of the year. Florida State now sitting at currently, 1-5 at this point. Really just having a horrible football season, 1-4 overall. Their one win coming against Cal. Obviously, Cal not winning that game. Their offense looked anemic in that one. At least their defense looked good. But overall, I think that it's pretty clear that you put Florida State pretty much at the bottom. They're having a bad year. They've got 5 losses so far. I would think they probably get 3 or 4 more losses to really, maybe get to that 9-loss category. Maybe 3 wins. They can sneak out a couple more wins, but the schedule is really not in their favor with how well the ACC is playing at this point. So Florida State just really having a horrible year and just maybe on a downward trend if they can't get it figured out to the players they want. And Mike Norvell, and he needs to get back on the wagon with not looking at just straight up 5 stars. And I think that he needs to go in the portal and look at the tape and look at the players that really fit his system or not. That's really what he needs to do going forward. But a really just horrific football year for Florida State. They just look really, really bad at this point. Georgia Tech. When you look at Georgia Tech, I think this is a football team that really started off really hot. You thought about them, 2-2 in the conference, 4-2 overall. They beat Boston College. For me, because they're sitting at 4-2, I'm putting them, I'm putting them in as a good football team at this point. And here's why. Even though they really can't pass the football, they play a special type of brand of style of, Brent Key style defense. They think they can run the football. You've looked at the number of football games. I had a mid early on this week. I can tell you this, when I was putting this list together, some of these are going to flip back and forth as the season goes on. But, I had them at mid. They beat Boston College. I have Boston College as a good football team. I still think Boston College is a good football team. Georgia Tech, they're physical at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football. I think that just the thing is just getting to them is they're a good football team, but they need more consistency out of it. I want to see more consistency. And I think obviously their passing game really struggles. I think, Haynes is a good quarterback, but not great. I think there's a lot of times where you just see he just doesn't know where to go with the football. Obviously takes off. The run game certainly does help him out quite a bit. So I think right now I have them as a good football team because they're physical. They're 4-2 right now, 2-2 in the conference. I don't have them as a conference champion contender with already 2 losses. I think they possibly have really 2 to maybe 3 more losses in the conference, which would be, really detrimental to what they do on a day in, day out basis, depending upon how their offense really goes back and forth with a lot of these teams. But right now, as we sit here through, really 6 weeks of the college football season, I've got Georgia Tech as a good football team and a team that can really beat anybody on any given day. But it just comes down to that consistency. What kind of team are they going to be going forward as the weeks go on? NC State, NC State overall, currently sitting right now towards the bottom here, 0-2 in the conference, 3-3 overall. Just nothing's been going right for NC State this year, and I was high on them. I put them in the bad category with Florida State. Obviously, Grayson McCall has not turned out to be the guy that he was supposed to be. Obviously, goes onto the injury, so they're on to the next quarterback. Just really disappointing. I thought they'd be a lot closer with a team like Tennessee and other teams in the ACC. They really haven't done that. I think when you look at their overall defensive brand, I don't like how the way their defense is playing. The offense obviously anemic. Just overall disappointing. I think this is just one of those down years for Dave Doran. Dave Doran's a guy that just always finds a way to get 9 wins every single year, a consistent winner. Maybe doesn't get over the top, obviously. Has not been able to find a way to get to the ACC title game, which is really the overall hindering issue with him. I think he's got a good defensive coordinator in Tony Gibson and what they're able to do on a day in and day out basis on the defensive side of the football. But just right now, they're not playing not a good style of football. And when you look at NC State on a year in and year out basis, I really have them as always one of the tough physical football teams that find a way to get to 9 wins. This is the year I don't think they do that. I think they're going to continue to struggle this year. I think, obviously, I think they're going to get the bowl eligibility, but right now it's just not looking good right now at NC State. When it comes to my Pitt Panthers, currently sitting at 5-0, they are certainly conference champion contenders, 1-0 in the conference. Obviously, Pitt, came in and battle tested with, obviously with Cincinnati. Wins at Cincinnati and West Virginia at home. They finally go to Chapel Hill, beat up North Carolina, to win there for the first time in its history. 0-7 in Chapel Hill, which is something to really think about overall. I think Pat Narduzzi's done a really good job of adapting, hiring Cade Bell, really a spread style offense, being able to really move the football around. Eli Holstein potentially continuing to play to his level, potentially getting more and more national recognition. Obviously, was recently put out with Rivals, put him in the top 10 in terms of overall Heisman races. I think right now the clear runner, if it was up to me at this point voting wise, I would be voting for Travis Hunter as the Heisman Trophy winner at this point, the way he's played on the offensive side of the football and the defensive side of the football. I don't really think it's too close at this point. But Pitt playing a good style of football. The only thing that I think that I want to see is they have obviously great offense from watching them, but I think their defense continues to show good spurts, but they also show bad spurts. If Pitt can find a way to play really good style defense, consistent style defense, I think there's a real opportunity where you see, hey, it's either going to be, Clemson, Syracuse, Pitt. You're obviously going to have Miami in there. SMU still up there. We'll see as time goes on. And that brings me to SMU. SMU right now, obviously, when you saw them early on in the year, they're 2-0 in the conference, 5-1 overall. They took a loss to TCU. Stone, who I thought was going to be a tremendous quarterback this year, gets benched. I thought it was a bad idea at the time. Well, I was wrong. SMU is firing on all cylinders. To me, they are a no-brainer at this point in terms of a conference champion contender, being undefeated in the conference at this point, a 5-1 record. As a Pitt fan, Pitt goes down there later on in the year to Dallas. Really cool atmosphere down there in Dallas-Fort Worth. I think overall, when you look at this football team at SMU, how they've grown as the season has gone on, I think that, potentially their defense can be waning at times to give up a lot of points. But right now, they're scoring a lot of points. So it's not mattering to them at this point. I think that, SMU, again, on a weekly basis, we'll see and continue where they go. But right now, I think just they're clicking on all cylinders. Rhett Lashley, a tremendous football coach in terms of being a head coach. The past couple of years, obviously they won 11 games last year. I thought he did a tremendous job when he was an offensive coordinator at Miami. I thought he did a really good job there. He just continues to build on the program and what he wants to do. And the first year in the ACC, obviously only 2 games in so far at the ACC, but he's done a really good job up to this point. I think he's learning and adapting very well, going to a Power 4 conference. We'll continue to watch them, and they're going to be fun to watch going forward. Next up, Miami. I think this is an easy no-brainer for me. Easily undefeated at this point. They're a conference champion contender. Obviously, there's been a lot of controversy around Miami. Obviously, Cam Ward, potentially one of the best, if not the best quarterback in the ACC at this point. Mario Cristobal seems to be having things going in the right direction. But controversy has surrounded them. Whether it was the Virginia Tech game, the way that game ended, people thought for sure that with the call on the field as a touchdown, that should have been held up as a touchdown catch for Virginia Tech, and they should have won that game with Brent Pry. They didn't win that football game. Then they go on to face Cal. They go to California. They get lucky with a couple calls down the stretch. People wondering if they should have been a blocking downfield that would have kept back a touchdown and not had them won the football game. So the ACC, I feel like with refs have kind of helped out Miami. Personally, me, I still think they're a good football team. They're a physical football team. I like the way their defense has been playing besides the Cal game. They really stood in the second half. But when that first half, it looked horrible. But the majority of the time so far this year, their defense has really played well, especially, too, when they just beat the living breaks off of Florida early on in the football season. I thought they did a really good job there. But their offense is really just clicking all at this point. Even with a slow start, when you got a quarterback like Cam Ward, who really is going to be up for discussion if he's going to go to New York as well with how he's playing. Overall, easily a top 2 quarterback in the ACC, if not number 1. I think he continues to show up at a high rate, and really Miami's just clicking all at this point. Again, when you look at them overall, 2-0 in the conference, 6-0 overall. They might be on a bye week this week, if I'm not mistaken, but 6-0, they're halfway through their schedule. The schedule was favorable to them. I think when you look overall to Miami and Clemson, I think really they're the 1-2 punch in terms of 2 teams that are really going to go to the ACC title game. Obviously, Pitt's up there because they're undefeated. There's the 3 undefeated teams to this point. Pitt's had more decisive victories in terms of more separation, but I think that with Miami, the way that they have a lot of talent, they've done a good job to this point. I think really the contenders for really competing for this conference, overall, you look at the group, I think just, you might have them at 1 and 2, but overall, I mean, there's a lot of good football teams. Clemson, Syracuse, Pitt, SMU, Miami, they're all in contention to this point. Next up, we have the Louisville Cardinals. Louisville is a very interesting case, and the reason why, when you look at Louisville, they started off 3-0, but then they let it really travel. They lost to Notre Dame up in South Bend. Overall, it was a close ball game. I still think they're a good football team after that game. Jeff Brom, obviously, I think he's a quarterback whisperer. I think he's a tremendous football coach. I think, coming over from Purdue, what he was able to do at Purdue with the lack of resources there was something truly special. I think overall he's got a good football team here, but when you have back-to-back losses and the way he's lost, it's a little concerning. And obviously, too, now you look at Louisville 1-1 overall, but they're on a 2-game slide. So I'm going to put them in the good category just because they're on a 2-game slide. And right now the momentum is fading with them. I thought for sure they'd be at least 4-1 to this point, but 2 back-to-back losses will really hurt them. I think overall, if they get back on track, it's because of their offense. And they need to be more consistent on offense. Obviously, it doesn't matter who's playing quarterback for Louisville. I think as long as you got Jeff Brom as your head football coach, you're in pretty much good hands. Next up, North Carolina. Obviously, Pitt just faced them. I think that when you look at North Carolina, I'm putting them in the bad category. And the reason why, obviously, it started with, they're on a 3-game losing streak. They gave up 70 points to James Madison. They blew a 20-point lead against Duke. Duke comes back, wins that football game. Manny Diaz looks like a hero. Malik Murphy looks like a hero. Duke's defense looks like a hero. 2 bad losses, and then they have a 10-point loss. They lose 34-24 to Pitt in Chapel Hill. Multiple bad mistakes by Mac Brown. Personally, I think Mac Brown's going to retire. They won't fire him. I think he'll retire. I see a lot more losses on the schedule for North Carolina. I think Criswell, the quarterback there, can be a really good quarterback down the road. He was third string this year just due to injuries. He's in there now. I think Omarion Hampton is a tremendous football player at the running back position. I think J.J. Jones at the wide receiver position is really, really good, but they need consistency. And I think Chip Lindsey's a good offensive coordinator, but they just can't overcome the defense. And I think Jeff Collins has not done a good enough job down there. He got fired at Georgia Tech for his inability to win at Georgia Tech. And it's funny, Jeff Collins was good at Florida, was good at Temple, but just these last 2 stops has really just not looked good. And I think overall, I think it's an ongoing trend, and they're going to continue to go potentially in the wrong direction as the season goes on. Next up is Virginia, currently sitting at 2-0 in the conference, 4-1 overall. I think it's an easy one. People might think that, well, they might not be too much battle tested in terms of what they're doing, but guess what? They beat Boston College, 24-14 this past weekend. I thought it was a good brand of football. I think Tony Elliott's really done a hell of a job. A guy who comes into this season, people look at him like, man, there's no way he holds on to his job. They're not a good football team. Well, guess what? They're 4-1. Their only loss coming out of conference. I can tell you this, when you're sitting 2-0 in the conference, you're sitting 4-1 overall. I think they're playing a good brand of football. Again, through 6 weeks, 5 games played so far, obviously because of a bye week they've had, like numerous other teams. I think you have to have the conversation that says, hey, they're playing a good brand of football, but where do they go from here? When you get to that halfway point, it's going to be fun to see how does this football team respond to the level of success that's there. Because this is really the first year out the gate after 5 games. Virginia really has a chance. They're undefeated in the conference. They're certainly conference champion contenders. As the weeks go on, we'll see where they adjust. But overall, give a round of applause to Virginia and Tony Elliott, never quitting, keeping that same motto. I know people love him from my contacts within the ACC, people that I know have coached at Clemson. I think he's done a tremendous job. People loved him at Clemson. Was really Dabo Swinney's right-hand man. Had a lot of success. Offensive coordinator at Clemson. Development of quarterbacks, obviously, with Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. Overall, I think Virginia's playing a good brand of football. But I think as the year goes on, they may slide. We'll see what they look like going forward. But Tony Elliott has a lot of momentum at this point, currently sitting 2-0 in the conference. Now comes to Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech, obviously 1-1 on in the conference, 3-3 overall in the season. This was a tough one for me, and the reason why is because I wanted to look in between good and bad. Overall they're 3-3. They're only 1-1 in the conference. But I think the 3-3 record gets me when I look at Brent Pry. I had a lot of really high, me personally, I had really high expectations. I thought Virginia Tech being, in another year of Brent Pry, potentially going up. Obviously, Drone's at quarterback. I thought with the talent level they had there, the amount of talent they have on the defensive line, this would be a really big year for Brent Pry. And I thought they really have a chance to really compete for the conference title with 1-1. But the way that they're playing at this point, obviously too many close losses, but obviously too, you see that the early season loss to Vanderbilt, that's kind of not looking as bad because obviously Alabama just lost to Vanderbilt. I just think that overall, schematically, I give credit to Vanderbilt on how they schemed Alabama after numerous games on tape of how they run. They're Tampa 1, especially on defense. We saw a lot of film tape today on Twitter on what they look like. Just overall, I think Virginia Tech right now is at mid because they're sitting at 3-3 right now. They've had some bad losses. Miami obviously I think potentially should have been a win. If that was a win, they'd certainly be in the good category. Or overall, that wouldn't have been a loss. They'd be in the conference championship contention with 2-0. So, but currently sitting at 3-3 right now, I got to put them in the mid category. And again, that can change as the years goes on. Virginia Tech fans, I'll probably hear from Virginia Tech fans, but I know you're only 1-1 in the conference. But overall, I think you're sitting at 3-3, 1-1. I want to see more out of Brent Pry. While win this weekend could really, adjust my scheduling. Wake Forest, I've got them down here. I just think that Wake Forest is having a bad year overall. 1-1, 2-3 on the year. I expect a lot more losses as the years go on. As the season goes on, obviously in conference play, they're 1-1 overall. I expect more losses to come. They're just not playing a consistent style brand of football. I think their schedule helped them out with getting those 2 wins. They're on a tough outlook. And I think Clawson, who normally does a good job there for what Wake Forest is, the smallest Power 4 conference football team in the country in terms of enrollment, what their resources are. I've been on campus at Wake Forest. I think it's a beautiful campus, a stadium that certainly fits their needs. But overall, when you look at the football team, I think there's a lot of question marks there overall. When it comes to the last team here, Stanford, 1-2 in the conference, 2-3 overall. This past weekend really put me in the downer for them. I'm putting Stanford for how they played down in the bad category. When you're looking at a 2-3 football team, multiple back-to-back losses, obviously, you're looking at Stanford now having 2 in a row, losing 2 in a row, 1-2 at home. The energy is certainly not there. Obviously, losing to Virginia Tech this past weekend, 1-2 overall, 2-3 on the year. We expected this year to be a really a growing year for Stanford, moving conferences. That's kind of where I have it at this point, and I think that overall Traylor is a good head football coach. I think he's going to build it the right way. He's getting more and more talent out there, but he just needs more time. Obviously, especially too, they're out of conference late. They lost to TCU early on in the football season. But overall, I think down the road, they have a potential to be a good football team. But right now, they're just not playing a good brand of football. If they're on their home field, when you're losing to Virginia Tech the way they did, it only hurts. Obviously, Notre Dame's in here, but guess what? Notre Dame's not in the ACC, not for football at least. So this is really where I have everything right now after, really 6 weeks of football. I think the majority of these teams have played 5 games. They've already had a bye week. In the conference champion contenders, I got, really some good football teams here. Clemson, Syracuse, Pitt, SMU, Miami, and Virginia. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams there. Other good football teams on top of them. Boston College, Duke, Georgia Tech, and Louisville. In the mid category, I got Cal, Virginia Tech. And then when it comes to the bad category, I've got Florida State, North Carolina, Wake Forest, and Stanford. A lot of North Carolina teams in there in the bad category. But overall, this is where I have it and where I'm really standing up to this point. Again, it'll be fun to see as the season goes on what it truly looks like. But that's currently where I have it at right now. Guys, please let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Where do you have each one of these teams ranked? I'd like to see your guys' thoughts. I love the comment section. I like what you guys do on a day in and day out basis. Again, if you have not done so, subscribe to the channel. We're having more interviews between the ACC and conference realignment, where we're going over there. Potentially a 70-team league. Obviously, the Big Ten, the SEC meeting, we'll be doing interviews there. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and like the video. It helps out with the algorithm. Share this with your friends. But more importantly, leave a comment down in the comment section. Guys, this has been another episode of Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen. I'm beyond appreciative for everything that you guys do on a day in, day out basis to make this show great. And I cannot thank you enough for the support of Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen. Guys, as always and forever, hail to Pitt and hail to the ACC. I'll see you guys next time.